Hi everyone, and I'm really sorry that I can't be with you today, but I'm really grateful to be able to at least present some of my paper that I was really looking forward to. So the paper is called Autistic Dreaming, Vibrant Memory, Activism and Environment, and it very much draws on a new book that I have coming out in a couple of weeks. The overview of this panel is really around bringing together critical disability studies with memory studies, and it very much builds in terms of my own work on the work of Suzanne Ittel, Kvich 2019, Redchigi 2014, Lynch and Russo, as well as others. But what I seek to bring to this particular paper is the question of how the neurodiversity paradigm disrupts, stretches and challenges ideas in memory studies. So my work for the book, and for indeed this paper, draws on a huge increase within publishing, within film, within blogs, online and artworks of memory works produced by autistic activists, and this is just a small selection of some of the many hundreds of works that I have analysed and looked at over the past 8 years that then has led to the book Autistic Dreaming. Conceptually, the book draws on a range of different key concepts, but one of the main ones is Ann Rigney's memory-activism nexus. And so my thinking in this regard is, how can we extend that nexus to think about autistic memory activism? I also really kind of bring in ideas from Aleida Assmann's idea that activist memories are those that also transform knowledge and understanding. And in that regard, what I'm really interested in is how the neurodiversity paradigm can then transform our knowledge and understanding of key concepts within memory studies, as well as key practices. Neurodiversity is the fact of neurological human variation, like hair colour, skin colour, eye colour. And the idea was first mooted by Judy Singer in 2009, picked up on by a range of people, but particularly Nick Walker in 2012. 3 key dimensions to neurodiversity are important to consider. The first is the idea for us of the neurodiversity paradigm, and this is the idea that every kind of mind is equal, and that's in contrast to the pathology paradigm, or one that sees different minds as somehow disordered or lesser. Secondly, there's the neurodiversity movement, and this is really about promoting rights and justice, for example, for autistic people. Then there's the act of neuroqueering, and I think as academics within memory studies, this is really important, because this is how we can think about reading, disrupting knowledge and power and culture through a neurodiverse paradigm. So an example of that in my book is the ways in which I begin each chapter thinking about a fairy tale, and how fairy tales are actually very often putting forward neurodivergent characters kind of in plain sight. If you think of characters such as Cinderella, for example, who can really only mask for as long as midnight, and then both her and her mice and her carriage return to the form that they were once before. Thankfully, it seems that her prince is also neurodivergent and very obsessively looks for her through trying to match the right foot to the right shoe. So with Autistic Dreaming, Vibrant Memory, Activism and Environment, the research examines autistic presences. That's drawing on Stuart Murray's work from 2008, and I'm very grateful to the fact that we have Stuart Murray as part of our panel at the MSA today. Through that, I look at how memory work has been created and produced by autistic activists from around the world. The research, as I said, was over about 8 years and examined hundreds of memoirs, autobiographies, websites, blogs, films and artworks internationally. And I was very keen to include both speaking and more than speaking autistic people. I was also keen to extend conventional methods and approaches. Largely my methods within memory studies have drawn on fairly traditional qualitative methods, the interview, the focus group, textual analysis. I have also very much engaged in creative practice, largely through my work writing fiction, but also plays. So I combine a thematic approach with a textual approach, but also use my own creative methods. And I worked in a studio over the 8 years, working with autistic presences, autistic people's stories through different art forms. So this is one of the images of mine on the right here, and these are kind of dotted throughout the book as kind of non-logocentric interventions into our thinking. And this idea really draws on an autistic writer and artist called Judy Endo, her idea of working alongside autistic activist work rather than simply extracting stuff from it. The other thing is, really, as a memory activist and somebody who's for a long time been involved in activism protest, it's not separate from the memory scholar, it seems to me, but is part of us. So in the first part of the book, I discuss how neuroqueering is a way of rethinking a key concept in memory studies, the key concept of what's called the way of remembering. So an example of that is from Anand Pralad's The Secret Life of the Black Aspie. I don't remember most experiences I've had or most of the people I've met, he says. I don't remember conversations I've had or the names of places I've been. I always feel like I've just got here today. I always feel like I'm walking in a snowstorm and my tracks are being quickly covered over. My memory doesn't stick to things, it sticks to colours and temperatures and tastes. I remember mostly sensory details and ideas because those are things I experience as most real. Now this really goes against the stereotype, doesn't it, of various representations of autistic people of having absolutely brilliant visual memories. And we can think of, a number of documentaries and films, Rain Man being one, for example, where this central character is the case. So what happened when I looked at a whole range of different autistic people's presences is this sense of extending and changing how we think about different ways of remembering. And a couple of other things around that is that autistic people's activist works extend our idea within memory studies, it seems to me, of micro-remembering. They also amplify sensory and perceptual affordances and offer different memories, different metaphors for memory, such as dots and associations. And they also point to the really significant fact of the way in which different people labour to remember and the labour that's put into remembering. I then consider how we might rethink sensory memory, which is a growing area within memory studies. And so an example there is a piece of work by Judy Endo, who says, "When it does happen, my movement of necessity becomes very focused and deliberate, as my surroundings are perceived to be in flux with stable items in transit and moving components, such as people walking, being fractured visually. Thus I see people puffing away like a white bull dandelion being puffed into the wind, while furniture, walls, buildings and sidewalks appear to move. I did not know which of my experiences were real and which ones were illusions." And there's lots of cases in different ways in the autistic activist memory works that I looked at that bespeak this whole variety of ways in which memory needs to be thought through again in terms of its connections with different kinds of sensory perceptions, which may be amplified, which may be go beyond our usual five senses. They may be hyper, they may be hypo, there may be synesthesia. But what's key is that memory is entangled within these accounts with energetic and elemental dimensions, which suggests this idea that I put forward in the book of vibrant memory, and links very much to a decolonised memory studies and a kind of re-enchantment of memory. Having said that, as Judy Endo warns us, when people learn of my different way of perceiving them, they're often intrigued because my way is novel to them. They tend to attribute more to it than is warranted or even practical. They somehow think that my way is magical or superior. It is not. So she warns us against kind of overdoing that in terms of thinking about a sort of magical dimension. Finally then, I think about more than human memory and looking at the ways in which autistic memory activists remember through and with the environment really builds on and extends the work happening in memory studies, from Sharma onwards really, Crownshaw, Crapps, Damassel more recently, around environmental memory. And I look initially at autistic activism and obviously environmental work, such as that by Greta Thunberg, Packer, McNulty, and see how they remember from the perspective of the more than human. But there's other works then by autistic people that haven't been produced as overtly environmental memory works, but nonetheless sort of point to these ideas of deep eco-memory and how significant it is that to some extent all of us are remembering through the environment and with the environment, and that we might therefore need to move away from a Freudian basis for ideas around memory and the unconscious, and instead maybe look to indigenous ideas around memory ontologies, or Carl Jung's ideas around the significance of the environment to memory. And certainly to think about memory as much more vibrant than hence we have so far looked at. Memory activism in the form of autistic memory activism also then neuroqueers our concepts of protest and memory activism. Morales says, for example, I personally cannot protest. I often struggle to complete a grocery trip. I cannot stand outside surrounded by people, loud music for hours without pretty severe overstimulation setting in. I commend those who engage in protests, but I'm no less politically active than they are. Autistic activist memory works also neuroqueer ideas of voice, speech and writing. They challenge ideas that certainly I've put forward during my career, this humanist idea of having a voice or giving a voice to marginalised groups, and suggests instead the need to integrate media technologies, assistive technologies for non-speakers, and that we need to crip the idea of voice. This also then challenges beyond that the conceptual division within memory studies between communicative and cultural technological memories. It makes it a bit more fuzzy in really important and interesting ways. Autistic memory activism is also reworking public commemoration and transforming collective memory in important ways. So Moxie Hurst's story here and Stephanie Bethany's blogs are completely seeking to change the commemoration of the Nazi Hans Asperger and saying instead we need to think about a woman who developed ideas around autism much earlier, the Ukrainian-born Jewish psychiatrist Grunya Sukhareva, who published work in the 1920s and that certainly Asperger would have been familiar with, but nonetheless he didn't cite her work. So just to quickly sum up then, this book, this paper, seeks to neuroqueer ideas of ways of remembering, extend ideas of sensory memory, highlight the importance of more than human memory, think about the possibilities out of this of neuroqueering time and temporality, rethink how sociality might be also considered in relation to more than human beings, how we might crip voice. And overall then, this is a contribution to the critical third wave of memory studies. Vibrant memory then recognises neurodiversity and biodiversity as a key part of memory studies. Thank you very much, and I hope that this, along with the other papers, will elicit some important debates and thinking over today and the next weeks and months to come. If you want any more information about this or the book, just email me, and I can also send you a flyer about the book, which apparently can reduce the price by 50%. Thanks so much.